Catherine, you mentioned all of these risks from business email compromise to check fraud, cybersecurity, insider potential risk. What are some of the things that businesses can really do to protect themselves from this myriad of risks out there in this new landscape?
Absolutely. So we've already touched on business email compromise, again, doing that callback.
Right.
When it comes to checks, uh, it sounds silly to have to say this, but I've had too many customers who are trusting, but never sign checks in advance. If you're leaving, don't leave, sign checks with your office manager, reconciling accounts regularly, checking on online banking. But one of the best ways to protect against check fraud is what's called positive pay. This is where the customer sends a check issued file to the bank, and it basically tells us the date, the check number, and the amount. And then there's something called payee match, which is what I really recommend, where you also tell us the payee. And then that way, anytime a check comes to clear the account, we're going to match that information up. And if it matches, we'll pay the check. And if it doesn't, we'll send the customer an exception file. And you go in and you say, oh yeah, oops, I did write that check. I forgot to put it in. Or at that point, you can reject it and let us know. With things like counterfeit or washing, changed endorsement, etc., a lot of times we issue a check, but the fraudster can go in and wash it, meaning they take off the payee or the amount. So you wrote it to Brent, but now that check is clearing to Michael. You wrote it for $50, but now it's clearing for $500. Without something like positive pay, we have no way of knowing what's legitimate and what's not. And the days of sight paying checks are over. We don't have anybody at the bank looking at each individual check. And something like positive pay helps put that protection in place. And so that is the number one thing I would recommend for a small business when it comes to check fraud.
Yeah, great advice.
As far as cyber goes, obviously never click on links or open attachments from an unknown sender, but even if it's a known sender, if it's out of the ordinary and you weren't expecting it, just because it's coming from somebody you know doesn't mean that they haven't been hacked. And so having that watchful eye and saying, was I expecting this? Is this normal? And again, pick up the phone if you're not sure. It's okay. One thing that I really recommend that not a lot of small businesses do is what's called a phishing test. We do that here at the bank. We test our employees on a regular basis. I know they all love it, but I highly recommend our small businesses do this as well. The weakest link is your employees. So you can use third-party software to create phishing emails. And if your employee clicks on it, they get a lovely pop-up that says you failed and now you get more fraud training. So I highly recommend that.
Catherine, I've heard a lot in the news, companies being held ransom in these ransomware attacks. Can you talk a little more about that?
What I recommend is that you start these conversations now. Have a business response plan. When you're in the middle of a ransomware attack, that is not the time to get the appropriate parties together and say, are we going to pay it? Are we not going to pay it? Do we have backups that are encrypted and tamper-proof, etc.? Go through all these scenarios now. In the middle of a ransomware attack, they typically only give you a short amount of time, and then the ransom either goes up or they start releasing bits of information to show that they're serious.
And then the final one, insider fraud.
So for insider fraud, some of these things sound very obvious, but it's really important to have that segregation of duties. Make sure that limits are appropriate. If somebody is never going to send more than $10,000 in wires, lower their limit to 10 or 12. They don't need a $100,000 limit or an unlimited. And unfortunately, we see a lot of businesses that aren't putting limits in there. So think about what's appropriate. You can always change them if you have some kind of anomaly. Dual control so that nobody can do anything without a second reviewer and approver. Notify the bank if your employees leave. I recommend surprise audits. Assignment rotation and mandatory vacations. So if somebody's doing something that requires a lot of effort to conceal, making them take a whole 5 days at a time usually can uncover some of those schemes, or if you're having people rotate in their assignments, etc.